Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Mama Jack podcast. Today, I have a very special guest named Heather. She is a postpartum doula, and she's going to be talking a little bit about what she does and matrescence. That's right, matrescence. Have you heard of that word? If not, you should look it up. Or let's listen. Let's see what she has to say about it. Without further delay, here's my interview with the beautiful postpartum doula, Heather.
Okay, so we have Heather. Heather is a postpartum doula and she has a lot to talk about today. Heather, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Today's been an okay day. I was able to get out and have lunch with some friends, which doesn't happen very often. So that's always good, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. So, what do you do?
Okay, great. So, as you said, I am a postpartum doula, and that means that I am lucky enough to be able to support new parents professionally as my career. So, I provide support for parents that's kind of maybe more similar to the way a family, extended family, or community members I have supported new parents in the past. So, educational support, emotional support, and help around the house.
That's amazing. So if I hired you and I had just had a baby, would you like as part of your, do you have like different plans? I guess I would say. I don't know what to call them. I would say plans. Like let's say some is phone support and that's like a certain thing. And then you have in-home support, which is a certain thing. And then you can go farther and farther. Like baseline, what is the start of your job?
Yeah, so there's basically three different ways that I support new parents. Um, One of them is doing home visits during the daytime when I am in someone's home for usually about 4 hours at a time. And I'm there to make sure they get something to eat. I give parents time if they need to take a shower or take a nap. I'm often there for like the first bath. Parents will, for especially first time parents, they'll ask me to help them get used to giving the baby a bath. I teach everything from, soothing techniques to baby wearing to car seat safety. I can help with breastfeeding, all of these types of things. And then usually there's also some laundry that happens to get done along the way, or some dishes, all those things that tend to build up when you have a new baby. And sometimes it's just kind of sitting and talking and listening and answering questions and just being there so mom doesn't, feel so alone all day long with the baby. So that's one thing that I do. And then the second thing that I do is overnight visits where I help mostly with baby care during the night so that parents can get more sleep. And then the third thing that I do is virtual support, and I use a combination of Voxer calls, drop in Zoom groups, and email resources to support parents without the home visit component as well.
Nice. So, what would you say is one of the biggest things parents hire you for?
I think in general, just for support. When people are expecting a baby, there's a lot of focus. And when you have a new baby, there's a lot of focus on getting the baby's needs met and making sure you have all the supplies for the baby and the baby is fed and the baby is sleeping and all of those things, which of course is so important. But there's not necessarily an automatic structure around making sure that the parents get their needs met so that they can take care of their baby. And that can look like a lot of different things and different days and in different families. But I think that's just so important that it's not just about the baby when you have a baby, but it's about the parents as well.
Yeah, mothers get forgotten a lot in that. Fathers especially too, because the mothers just had the baby. The fathers are kind of just chilling with the baby. They haven't been around the baby like the mother has because obviously we grow them. So it's a little different for the dad. So
Yeah.
you are just supporting and always possible if they need help with the baby, if they need help doing something themselves, if they have any questions about the newborn phase. God, would I have wanted to have a nighttime help? Oh my God, what a blessing that is for you to do.
Yeah, thank you. It really is a privilege for me as well, for these families that, invite me into their home during this time of life when, it's kind of a messy time. It's not always like your public face that you want to show to everyone, but I just kind of jump right in and roll up my sleeves and just do what needs to be done.
Yes, that's awesome. That's amazing. So you wanted to talk about matrescence a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. This is such a interesting concept that I have come across in doing my education and learning in this field. And again, it's kind of more focused on the mom side of things, which is and dads too, but what tends to get a little bit more overlooked when everyone is focusing on the baby. And what I have learned that I find really interesting is that there is this developmental stage that is being called matrescence. That it's not something that people ever really thought about for a long time, but you're starting to hear more and more about it. And the word matrescence has a similar root to adolescence. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of drawing the parallels. We all know about like the developmental stage of adolescence and how things are changing physically, hormonally, developmentally. There's so much that goes on during that time, changes in the brain, and all these different things. And so, what they're finding is that it's very similar to the changes that happen when you are pregnant and when you have a baby. And all of these same areas, you're experiencing these like massive shifts in all of these same areas. So, you're changing physically, you're changing mentally, your sense of identity is changing. Hormonally, there's these massive changes. So there's all of these things that are changing, and we don't have that concept that you are going through this developmental stage as a new mother, especially. So once you have this idea in mind, it does kind of just shift the whole conversation, because we can tell that like it is a change, it's a stage. There's all of these changes happening. Like, of course it's going to be hard. Like, we all know that, when you're a teenager, it's hard because of all these things going on. But then when you have a baby, we kind of expect that adjustment to just be like easy and sweet and like a diaper commercial.
Yeah.
And everything looks so beautiful, and obviously there are those sweet moments, but also there's these massive changes going on. So like, no wonder so many people struggle with that time in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I had postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, so I was going through it. And it's like, you're right. No one ever talks about the aftercare of mothers. I think physically and mentally, honestly, because
Mhm.
your
Yeah.
body is changing so much, so much. And I hate the term when people are like, oh, a snapback, as far as like
Mhm.
physically and stuff. Like, I almost find it offensive when people say that because your body's never going to be the same. Your body is
Yeah.
never going to be the same. You created a human and before you did not, and that is fine. Now you can find your new normal, But as far as like all this pressure for people to snap back, I feel like that puts out this image that like everything's going to go back to the way it used to be. You just have this beautiful baby and blah, blah, blah. Like, I personally, when I hear that, it like kind of makes me livid. And I don't know if it's because I had such a hard time postpartum, or
Mhm.
if it's just not realistic. Like, it's not realistic. And maybe for some people it is, but those people normally have money, have nannies, have trainers, have had a dietitian their whole pregnancy. You know what I mean? And it's just for the average woman, like, that's not how it works. And as far as mentally, I mean, I thought I was going nuts. And it was crazy because, hormones, one day you're fine and you're blissful and you're like, oh, yay, everything's beautiful. The next day you're on a rampage, like, and you don't know why. You don't know why. Like, maybe your baby pooped and you just start crying, or like you're just sitting there watching something and start crying, or like my husband would, like, a sock would miss the, laundry basket. Like, it was like crazy. And this is such an important time in a woman's life after she has a child. And I want to talk more and more about this subject because I feel like it's so important and it needs to be out there. It needs to be that third trimester. You know what I mean? Like, we need to keep going with this. Like, it doesn't stop when your baby comes. Like, your body is constantly changing, especially when you're producing milk, right? Because I learned on my journey with my son, I tried to breastfeed him. It was not working. I tried for 2 months. I would try to latch, then I would end up pumping. And it was just like this horrible circle for 2 months that I barely got sleep. And I, pumped a lot for a long time. I'd say for the first like 6 months, I was still doing every 4 hours around the clock. Okay. And then I didn't realize that every time you drop a pump / every time you drop a feeding when you're breastfeeding, you get a fluctuation in hormones. So I would be like, okay, I'm going down. And so here I'm thinking that like my body's producing less, so it'll get better and better, right? I wasn't ready for that roller coaster ride each time. And I was like, what is going on with me? Like, this isn't me. And yes, like becoming that new person, because we all change when we become mothers. Like, you change. I mean, I'd love to meet a woman that says, oh, things haven't really changed. Again, maybe they don't spend a lot of time with their baby then, because you mentally, physically, like spiritually, even if you're not spiritual, your energy shifts so much. So have you, as far as the matrescence goes, that's part of the thing that you're helping these women with as a postpartum doula as well, right? Like, educating them on what can happen afterwards and what your body's going to go through and what to expect. So if I came to you and I was like, I've heard of this matrescence, like, what would you do to help me get through that time?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes it difficult for new parents is that we haven't really spent a lot of time around other new parents. Um, and we tend to be so isolated in our society. It's not like we're living in this kind of close-knit community or extended family where, our neighbor, our sister is having babies and we're around them the whole time before we even have babies, and we just tend to be a lot more isolated in our culture. So when these things happen, it does feel like it hits us out of the blue. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's normal, what's not normal. And so that's one of the things that I provide, just being there, spending time with you, listening, kind of offering that sense of perspective. So if I've seen 15 other babies do something similar, it's like, yeah, this is just something that tends to happen. It will pass, or like, I'm not so sure about this. So, I don't have any medical training, so definitely if I see something that is even slightly concerning, my go-to would be to recommend that you know, call your pediatrician, or I can give referrals to like lactation consultants and different other professionals who might be able to help. But even with that, like you have a 15-minute appointment with your doctor, you're trying to cram in all these questions and all of these things. And just a different experience if I'm there with you, you know, sitting on the couch with you for a couple of hours, and it's just more relaxed and more natural to kind of see how your life is going and where those needs are.
Yeah, because even when your family and friends come over to quote help, I feel like it's never in the way you need.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound rude, but it's never in the way you need. Like now I know if I have somebody with a newborn around me, I would literally be like, what do you need? And I
Yeah.
give them not only what do you need, but give them options, because sometimes when you're so tired, it's a new baby, you don't even know what the hell you need. You're just like, you know, you're fine. Like I always found myself with my first, like, I'm fine. I got this. I'm fine. I got this. It's like if somebody would have came and held him and took care of him for 3 hours while I could nap, or somebody make me a meal while I handle him, you know, like, because
Mhm.
he's my new fresh
Yeah.
prize, you know, like, so it was always something different. And
Hmm.
it was just it's very interesting. And you're right. In our culture, you're not around a lot of people with newborns unless it's like your sister. I mean, your brothers even pushing it, because I feel like brothers are normally, it's more like the wife's side that always comes in, like
Yeah.
normally. But
Yeah, we have a lot of barriers to that support. So we tend to either live far away from family, or just living kind of separate lives, working, people are working full time, or they have health issues, or there's just kind of emotional baggage, where having them around really isn't that helpful. There's so many different barriers that it's just, some people are lucky enough to have some really great support people in their lives, and like I wish we could all have that, but in our culture that tends to be the exception rather than the norm.
yeah, yeah. Have you ever listened to the Birth Queens podcast?
No, not that one.
One is a doula, and the other one is, oh my God, how a midwife.
Hmm.
And when I was pregnant, that's all I listened to. So it's funny, most people, but they don't talk a lot about postpartum. It's all about
Hmm.
pregnancy, right? Because it's a doula and a midwife. So
Yeah.
I remember listening and I felt like I was so prepared for birth, which honestly I was. I was like, whatever happens, happens. This is what I'd like for it to happen. But afterwards, like, I felt like I was lost. Like, what the hell do I do now? Like, I
Yeah.
remember when Kennedy came home with us the first night, like we were both, I think maybe I got 15 minutes of sleep that night, and my husband like started to literally go crazy, and I like had to make him leave. I was like, you go
Mhm.
sleep and turn off the monitor in our room. I'm going to be in here. Luckily, we had a bed in the same room as the like crib. We tried to keep him in the crib from day one. And
Mhm.
it was just in like people don't prepare you for what's next. And it's, I mean, a lot of people aren't very honest with what's next either. Like, I'm the brutal truth, raw. This is what happened with my kids. I wanted to go nuts. I would cry. We would cry together. But also, now my kids are 3.5 and 18 months soon. And you kind of miss though, like you don't realize like that intimate moment at night when you're up with them all alone is such a special experience, even if you're hating life. Like in the
Yeah.
future you're going to be like, oh my God, that was so sweet. But it does
Mhm.
not feel sweet when it's happening and you're sleep deprived and like
Yeah, exactly. And it really is a shame that, like, in our society as new moms, we have to cope with so much that, like, we have those moments that we get to enjoy, but we don't get to really, like, absorb all the wonderful things about that time, because so much of our energy is put towards just surviving and making it through.
Yeah, for sure. So do you normally work with people that don't have family around?
Yeah, that's often the case. Sometimes we kind of work around it. So if they have family coming for a few weeks or whatever, then I might fill in the gaps or come in. Sometimes when dads or partners are going back to work after a leave, that may be more of the time. And then other times it's kind of right away when they get home from the hospital. I think that's another. So it's very individual to the needs and to the situation. And I have to say, like, I felt the same way as you with my oldest. It's kind of like, especially as first time parents, it's like you spend so much time and energy preparing for the birth. It's kind of like preparing for a wedding and being completely focused on the wedding day and not thinking at all about like the rest of your life, how it's
Yeah.
going to change after you get married. And it really is kind of like that tunnel vision. And when I had my oldest, we were actually living overseas in Asia, so very far away from any kind of extended family, and everyone was telling me like, oh, you're so brave having a baby in another country, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, I really wasn't brave at all. I was just like completely naive and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. In hindsight, it's like, I can't even believe that I did that. But you just don't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know.
I mean, if I could choose to go back in time, I would have moved to like Germany to have my kids. Because I feel like they have the best like postnatal care in the world.
Yeah.
I just keep like the US needs to do better. They need to do better, and not even with like paid time off, okay? Like that's one thing, right? Looking after the mothers. The mothers should have an aftercare treatment plan with psychologists, with, physical therapists, with all of these things. And it's just like, oh no, you had separation in your stomach muscles. It'll go back. It's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe you might need a little bit. Oh, you pee your pants every time you sneeze. Oh, that's normal. When it's really not. Like, it's really
Mhm.
not. There's stuff happening. Like, you need pelvic floor physical therapy.
Yeah.
And mentally, I mean, dang girl, I checked every box. I checked every box at the pediatrician every time. I was just fine. But this mama, I'm telling you, I had so many mornings of waking up and crying because I woke up. And it was just like, I could not believe that no doctor caught that from me. Like, it was
Mhm.
they just ask such general questions. It's almost like they don't want to deal with it. And
Yeah, it's true. I've actually heard in a training about how, for a long time, a lot of doctors' offices were choosing not to screen for postpartum depression and anxiety because if someone screened positive, they didn't know what to do. They didn't have any next step to take. So they just kind of ignored it and swept it under the rug. Like, it really is such a shame that in this country, we have to be so proactive to get help and like just keep looking and keep looking. And if you don't know where to look or what to do, or you can reach out and ask and get told no. Like, you have to keep asking and keep asking. And like, that's not something that a woman should have to do while she's going through all of the other things that she's going through.
no, I totally agree with you. And you know what? Sometimes after dealing with a newborn and all this stuff, at the end of the day, you just don't want to. Like, and the whole like baby blues thing. I just think there needs to be a lot more education about what can
Mhm.
happen
Mhm.
postnatal, because baby blues, okay, yes, I had both. I had baby blues and postpartum depression. Baby blues was very different than my postpartum depression. Baby blues
Mhm.
was me crying, was me like a very small transition. postpartum depression was rage, was, disassociation, was I mean, I could name you 50 million things. I have a whole podcast about it. And it's just,
Yeah.
I don't understand. So if you go into a house and there's a mother showing symptoms of postpartum depression or anxiety or psychosis, how do you approach that?
Again, that really depends on the situation. But I do have lots of resources, whether that be online resources, therapists, doctors. Obviously, I have not encountered this personally, fortunately, but obviously, if I was concerned about psychosis, that's a medical emergency. That's like a 911 call,
Yeah.
right off the bat. If it's something that's extremely concerning like that, which is, it happens, but it's also very rare, and it's not something that I personally have come across. But definitely lots of anxiety, and sometimes it's a judgment call. What is kind of normal that comes with the territory of having these responsibilities and this heightened awareness and all of this stuff, and like, when does someone need extra help, and what's going to be helpful for that person? Is it just getting more of a break, getting some exercise? Is it seeing a professional? So again, it's a lot of just conversations, a lot of listening, making resources available, and then it's up to each family to decide also how they want to proceed with that, because I can't force them to do anything. So sometimes it's just me being there that's going to be kind of the help that they can accept in that moment.
So what is like true postpartum psychosis? Because I had a friend that went to her doctor and said she was having visions of her like throwing her baby on the ground, and the doctor said that is normal, it'll pass. And she's like, that is not normal, I need to see a therapist or a psychiatrist, and had to push the doctor. Would that be considered psychosis, or are we talking like something completely different?
Yeah. So I'm not an expert, I'm not a psychiatrist, but in my understanding, like, there are different levels. So there is such a thing as intrusive thoughts, which are very common. They don't feel normal at all, but they happen quite frequently, especially for new parents who do maybe picture or think kind of those what if thoughts, like, what if this horrible thing happened? What if I did this horrible thing? And it can be very shocking and very difficult to talk about. But it is kind of, it is a way that the brain has of protecting your baby. So it comes with anxiety, definitely, but it's kind of like your brain thinking through, like, in this worst case scenario, like, how would we handle this? How would we cope? How would we protect the baby if this horrible thing were to happen?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, like therapy, being able to talk about it, seeing someone about it, definitely, because they can be extremely disturbing and feel really awful, but they're not necessarily a sign of like a psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually quite common. So in a psychosis, it's more like a break with reality, and it's a shift. It's not like, oh, what if this happened? It's more like, oh, I should do this.
Yeah.
And so that's something that is not common, and is clearly not normal, but it's feeling more of like that urge to actually do it. So if you feel like, oh, what if I dropped my baby, and it's like, it horrifies you, and you're like, I can't imagine that I'm thinking this, and
Mm-hmm.
this is not normal, this is terrible. Like, that's a good thing. Like, that's a sign that, like, you're thinking about this thing, but this is not the right thing.
Yeah.
But if you're, you know, if you have those kind of sneaking thoughts, like, oh, maybe like I should do this, like this is the right thing to do, or like you're, you know, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, and you're just really kind of losing that connection with reality, like that's a psychosis, and that's the like a medical emergency.
That's so scary. And that can
Yeah.
all be caused by hormones, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there really is not as much research as there should be, but definitely, I think that hormones would play a huge part in that. And like I said, it's extremely rare, but it does happen. And we actually had it recently, just this year, in not too far from me, in Boston, there was a tragedy that was related to postpartum psychosis. So that was really difficult to hear about.
I feel like that's where we're messing up in the whole system, right? For women. It's like if we would have had something in place, or if there would be something in place that's like, oh, you know, you have to see a psychologist, or we recommend you see even we recommend you see a psychologist and this and that and that, then maybe they could have caught it well before anything happened, you know? Like it's it like I know this sounds nuts, and a lot of people that don't have kids and haven't been through it, like I feel for the women that go through that and do those things, because you
Mhm.
know once she snaps out of that and she's back in her normal state of mind, she's never going to be able to live with herself.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think of the poor woman, like, oh God, it was years ago that, you know, ended up, you know, this is very trigger worthy, but drowning her kids in the bathtub. And
Hmm.
I was just like, you know, when I heard about it, I was like a teenager, I think, when that story came out. And now after having kids, I'm like, that poor woman. How
Yeah.
ignored was she? There had to have been clear signs of this coming. Like, I almost felt like the husband is at fault. Like, everybody that came to visit is at fault. And they should be part of the whole, like, trial and everything like that. Because how can you see a woman suffering so much and not say anything? Like, it's one thing if you're like, hey, we tried to get her somewhere, but you can literally call 911 on somebody and they will take them away for those thoughts like that. So in my opinion, like, she had a husband. Like, where the hell was he, you know? And
Yeah.
not that it makes it any less horrible, but I think people overlook that these aren't people that are right in the mind. This is something taking over. And I've never had anything like that happen to me, but I've had, you know, times where I will just break in my head and, you know, I was hurting myself. And it wasn't like I could even think about it. This was like immediate reaction. Now, I talked to my therapist, it's handled, it hasn't happened in a very long time, but she said it was from PTSD. And when you lose control in your life, you can have moments where you snap, and one of the ways to take control is self-harm, because you're doing it to
Mhm.
yourself. So it's just, and for me, like, my husband, you know, heard of that. I hid it from him for a while, but once he saw it happen, he right away, we need to get you to talk to somebody. We need to get you into therapy. Like, you need to have more help, Jackie, because something isn't lining up here. Like, this is not you. You haven't been my wife in a very long time. He wasn't picking on me, but I knew what he was saying was true, you
Yeah.
know? That's why the whole matrescence thing and stuff, I think, is so important, and I think needs to be taught as you're pregnant. I think it needs to be taught before you decide to have a kid, like all of
Mhm.
this stuff before you decide to have a kid, because it is not for the weak, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, systematically, there's so many things that, you know, fall short in this area. And the other thing that blows my mind is just thinking about how, you know, this seems normal to us because it's how life has been roughly for the past few generations. But thinking about it in terms of like human history as a whole, you know, 99.9% of human history, when people were having babies, they were living in these close-knit groups. There was groups of, women around them who would, and men and families, and they would be raising their children together. And when someone had a baby, the other people were around to take care of the mom, to take care of the baby. And that was just the normal thing. And it's not the normal thing in our society. And it, like, then we get these feelings like, as a mom, we should have it all together. We should be able to snap back and take care of our kids and love every moment of it. And it's like, that's not, biologically, historically, that's not how it works. And it's normal to have people around you helping you. It's normal to, not come home from the hospital to an empty house with a baby and be like, hey, good luck, see you in 6 weeks. Like, that's not the normal human way of having babies. And so I think just, systematically everything, all of the helpers, the psychiatrists, the physical therapists, like, they can even be hard to access. It can be hard to find someone in your community or someone who has availability to see new patients or someone you can afford on your insurance. And like, there's just so many layers and barriers. And, we have this shame where we don't want to talk about what we're going through because we think we're the only one. So then everyone thinks they're the only one. And it's just, little by little, we got to kind of break out of that.
Yeah, that's literally what I made this podcast for, was to talk about everything that people don't talk about. Because
and I have to say, I've been listening over the past couple of days. I've been listening to some of your episodes, and like, I'm just really grateful for you and the work that you're doing, because this is exactly what needs to happen. And it's not easy. It's hard for those of us who kind of stand up and speak out about it, but nothing is going to change if we don't.
Exactly. And that's my whole purpose. I hope one day I can have enough ears on me that maybe I can start a women's foundation that helps with this kind of stuff. And or we can change something. I mean, like I said, in Germany, I think you get an overnight helper for like the first couple weeks or something. It's like what they do. It's just what they do. Like, it's not even a question. Like, that's just what happens. Like, they book you somebody and that's that, and it's just so different. I don't know. I don't really want to get in. I could chat about politics all day with this stuff, like all day. But I'm going to ask you a question for the mothers to be. What are the things postpartum wise that you suggest we all have in our house before the baby comes for the mother?
That's a great question. And personally, I actually don't have a ton of like product recommendations. I know there's tons of things out there, that you can buy, and all the different products that kind of try to fill this gap. But to me, the most important thing, as we've been talking, is to have the people around you, the support, the communication, and not just warm bodies, but like people that you can really connect with, who listen to you, who care about you, and also professionals. I think it's very, very helpful if you can connect, if you're thinking about breastfeeding, connect with a lactation consultant before you give birth. And then you'll have that person, them, you feel comfortable with them, you have their number in your back pocket. You don't have to be online, Googling lactation consultants at 2 a.m. when you haven't slept for 3 weeks. Connect with a psychologist, connect with a mom's group. Like, go to your local mom's group before you have the baby. You're a mom, you're pregnant, your baby hasn't been born yet, but like, you're a mom, and go there and make those connections. Have those conversations with your partner. Like, if I'm feeling rage, like, this is what I want you to do. This is what would be helpful for me in that moment, or if you're feeling left out, like, how do you want to handle that? And like, to sit down and have those conversations and it's great to go shopping and do the baby registries and buy all the stuff. And that's a lot of fun. But, once you have that baby and you're experiencing the matrescence and the sleep deprivation, like all the cute little outfits in the world aren't going to be that helpful. So I think, if you can, investing in a postpartum doula or a house cleaner or a meal service or whatever it is that you think could be helpful for you. But you just kind of have that focus on the emotional preparation and the support, at least as much as on going out and buying all the things.
I agree with that. I mean, because really the hospital should give you everything you need for recovery.
Mm-hmm.
People don't
Yeah.
realize that and they go out and buy stuff. Although I do have to say, the Frida Mom Kit was the shit after my second kid. Those like iced pads were like the
Mm-hmm.
best thing that happened to me. But you can make your own at home too. Like they call them padsicles, where you put
Mm-hmm.
like aloe and lavender and what else, witch hazel on them, and then you put them
Yeah.
in the freezer, But yes, I mean, that Frida Mom Kit was great. And the underwear, I mean, I'm a weirdo. I like the hospital underwear.
Yes. When you're in the hospital, collect all of the mesh underwear. Just keep putting it in your suitcase and they'll keep bringing you more.
Yeah, it's so weird. Everyone's like, oh, they're so horrible. I'm like, why do I kind of like it? It's like airy and not tight, and I like it like a weirdo. But okay, so any other advice that you have for new moms or not so new moms? Because right, every baby is not the same, and every pregnancy is not the same, and every postpartum is not the same.
Yeah, and it's true. We hear the word postpartum a lot and think, in terms of like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and those are definitely real things. But the word postpartum itself just means after birth. So anyone who's given birth is postpartum. Technically there's no end limit. Like for the rest of your life, it's after you've given birth. And sometimes those challenges can show up years later, and I think, and there's new challenges too. Like it's different. My kids are older now, and there's definitely certain things that have gotten easier. But overall, like when you're a mom, it doesn't really like it's different, but there's always those challenges, and you have these human beings that you love so much, but there's always challenges even when they're adults. And I think my big, my heart for moms is just to be gentle with ourselves, and to love ourselves, to accept where we're at, to recognize that like it is the fact that things are hard for us as moms, like it's not a sign that we're failing as people, but really we live in this culture and this society that has failed us as moms. And the fact that we're having these struggles and we're working so hard and we're loving our kids and we're getting through it and we're being there for our families, like we're so strong, and like we're coping with this, some aspects of our situation as moms in this country are really terrible, but like we're still there for our kids, and we love them, and we're trying to do our best for them, and like we really are, like it's an amazing thing.
It is amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. It's a huge change.
Yes.
Huge change. Huge. Like I said, unless you have a lot of money and can pay people to do everything, and you just get to see your kid to say, hi, oh, I love you.
Yep. And that's a village. Like
Yeah.
it used to just naturally happen. You wouldn't have to pay any money or go out and look for it. You just, when you had a baby, there was this village around you. And now it's just something that takes a lot of effort and financial resources and time resources to kind of build up for yourself.
I don't know, girl. I'm still, If postpartum is after birth, I'm still postpartum. If you were closer, I might pay you to come over here in the morning and get my kids up so I can freaking have my coffee and just chill in peace, because that is my need right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
thank you so much for being on. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
if you don't mind, I do offer a few free resources for parents that I would love to let people know about.
Go
Um,
ahead, girl.
and I mean, I love being a postpartum doula and doing these home visits. But obviously it's not like financially feasible for everyone. And I really want to be able to help as many people as I can. So one thing that I do once a month, I have a free Zoom meetup, and I invite expectant parents, new parents, and also more experienced parents. And generally what I do is pick a topic like baby feeding or going back to work or sleep. And I ask for some parents to just come and tell their personal stories so that, we're not so isolated. We hear what it's like for other people. And it's also really helpful for expectant parents or newborn parents to hear other people's experiences. So I do that once a month on the weekends. And also on my website, I have a free, I call it like the nesting guide or the nesting journal. And it's just a download that you can go through and really focus. It's like that emotional support person version of a baby registry. So there's
Mm-hmm.
journal prompts to think about, what challenges do you anticipate? What do you think would be helpful for you? There's a list of resources to kind of get you started. There's pages to fill in, like for different numbers of people that you can research in your community. There's conversation starters to have those talks with your partner, all sorts of things there that you can download from my website.
That's amazing. So what is your website?
So it's infantconcierge.com.
Okay, and I'll post that in the description of the podcast as well, so everybody will have that. And I'll post it on my Instagram whenever I, put this up and everything, so
Yeah,
everybody can
thank
have
you.
that.
I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook at Infant Concierge as well. So I put all
Okay.
the information there for the monthly meetups and all those things.
I mean, I want to be a part of one of those. I
Of
just don't know
course.
if I scare people. That's what I always tell new like people that are going to be a parent or are like thinking about having kids. I'm like, listen to my podcast with caution. Because I'm giving you my real truth, not
Mhm.
everybody's real truth, but
Mhm.
my real truth. And I always say that because it is a little much to handle when you're like in that phase of, oh yay, I can't wait to have a baby, and then you hear about my postpartum depression and my anxiety and mental breakdown and blah blah blah, and it's like, oh my god, do I want to have a baby? Guess what? They are the freaking best thing in the world. After
Mhm.
my postpartum depression got handled and my mental breakdown was over, the love that you feel in your heart towards those humans is indescribable. You
Yeah.
cannot describe it. You feel it in all of your body, all of your body. And I truly mean that. So I'm sorry if I scare anybody on my podcast. I'm just going to put that out there right now. it really is one of the hardest working things you'll ever do, but there's just nothing like having those little gremlins with you, you know?
It's true. I know.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for everything today. It was wonderful talking to you, and I can't wait to be a part of one of your Zooms.
Oh, great. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you're doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, well, we sure did learn a lot in that one, didn't we? I mean, having a postpartum doula, I feel like, is just the best thing in the world. I personally didn't get to have one, and man, am I jealous of the people that hire them. They're just there for you, for you. And then if you need help with your baby, they know some of that too. They could help you with that. But the most important thing about after delivering your child is you. You need your rest. You need care as well. And I think through listening to that interview, you can see how important that is. And we forget about ourselves a lot in this journey. And if you have the option of having a postpartum doula, I mean, duh, you should get one. They're nothing but help and love for you. Thank you so much for listening to the Mama Jack podcast. You can find me on TikTok, The Mama Jack. You can find me on Instagram, The Mama Jack, and Facebook, The Mama Jack. I am everywhere. If you have any comments, if you have any suggestions for episodes, please contact me. I would love to hear that. And if you can, leave me a review. I would love to hear what you think about this. Thank you so much for listening again, and stay tuned for the next episode.